Do you know what greed sounds like? It doesn't sound like the quiet hum of a money counter. In 1983, on the floor of the Chicago Board of Trade, greed sounded like a riot. It was the roar of 500 men, trapped in a wooden pit the size of a boxing ring, screaming until their throats bled just to buy a contract of soybeans. The smell of that place was a toxic mix of cheap tobacco, stale coffee, unwashed bodies, and raw fear. In that pit, a PhD meant nothing. Manners meant nothing. There were only two types of animals, predators and prey. The air was so thick with desperation that you could taste the metallic tang of adrenaline on your tongue. But our story today doesn't start in that noise. It starts in the cold, clinical silence of a windowless room across the street. A room where the most dangerous experiment in financial history was about to begin. An experiment designed to answer a brutal question. Can a complete loser from the street be reprogrammed into a lethal financial killer? Welcome to Victor Invests. Today we aren't just reading a book. We are entering the war room. This is the story of the turtles. Picture Richard Dennis. He was the prince of the pit, but he didn't look like royalty. He didn't wear Italian suits. He wore rumpled polyester pants that were too short, thick glasses that slid down his nose, and he always looked like he had just woken up on a park bench. But make no mistake, he was a god. He turned $400 into $200 million before his 35th birthday. When Dennis walked onto the floor, the chaos stopped. Men who would stab each other for a tick of profit froze in reverence. If Dennis bought, the market bought. If Dennis sold, the market crashed. But Dennis was bored. He was tired of being a lonely genius. One night, in a heated whiskey-fueled argument with William Eckhart, his best friend and a skeptical mathematician, Dennis dropped a bombshell. He slammed his glass down and said, "I'm tired of hearing about talent, Bill. I could train a janitor to do exactly what I do. Trading isn't an art. It isn't voodoo magic. It's a science. It's a set of rules." Eckhart laughed, shaking his head. "You're crazy, Richard. You have a gift. You can smell blood in the water. You can't teach intuition. You can't teach guts. It's in the genes. You're born a trader or you're born a victim." So they made a bet. A wager that would change Wall Street forever. A small, unassuming ad appeared in the Wall Street Journal. "Richard Dennis is looking for apprentices." Thousands applied. The line went around the block. But Dennis didn't want the Harvard MBAs. He didn't want the guys in suspenders who thought they understood the economy. He threw those resumes in the trash. He famously said, "I don't want people who think they know everything. I want people who know nothing." He gave them a bizarre written test. It wasn't about math. It was about psychology. It was a trap. One question read, "True or false? You should buy when a stock is low and sell when it is high." 95% of people answered true. It's common sense, right? Dennis rejected them all. The correct answer, in his world, was false. You buy when it's high and sell when it's higher. You sell when it's low and cover when it's lower. It was counterintuitive. It was insane. It went against every survival instinct humans have developed over 1,000,000 years. Who made the cut? A ragtag crew of misfits that looked like a casting call for a bad sitcom. A blackjack player kicked out of Vegas for counting cards. A Dungeons & Dragons game designer living in a fantasy world. A bored accountant who hated his cubicle. An unemployed actor drowning in debt. And a 19-year-old kid named Curtis Faith, who had lied about his age just to get an interview. They were outsiders. They had nothing to lose. And that was exactly what Dennis needed. Blank slates. He put them in a classroom in downtown Chicago. No windows, no TV, no calls home, just charts. And Dennis's voice. The first 2 weeks weren't training. It was deprogramming. It was a psychological exorcism. Dennis stood at the blackboard and wrote 3 words in chalk, pressing so hard the chalk snapped. Prediction is death. He told them, "You think I made $200 million because I know gold is going up tomorrow? Wrong. I don't know, nobody knows. If someone on TV tells you they know the future, they are a liar or a fool. We do not predict, we react. So what do we do? Someone asked, their voice trembling. Dennis replied coldly, we follow. We are turtles. We hide in our shells until the market tells us to move. He taught them a trend-following system so simple, it was almost insulting. When the price breaks the 20-day high, you buy. Do not ask why. Do not read the news. Do not fear the price is too high. Just buy. And when the price hits the 10-day low, you sell. I don't care how much you're losing. I don't care if you think it will bounce back. Cut it immediately. If you hesitate, you die. No fundamental analysis, no earnings reports, no listening to rumors about the harvest in Brazil. Just, if this, then that. Dennis turned them into biological robots. Your emotions are the enemy. Your ego is trash. Leave it at the door. If you feel comfortable with a trade, it's probably wrong. Then, Dennis did the unthinkable. He gave each of these rookies, people who had never traded a single contract, an account with $1 million of his own real money. Go ahead, he said. Make me rich or make me broke. You think having $1 million to trade is a dream? It was a nightmare. The first month was hell on earth. The markets went sideways. It is what traders call the whipsaw. It's the meat grinder. Imagine this. Monday morning, silver breaks the high. The system screams, buy. 19-year-old Curtis Faith, hands shaking, places the order. He feels the rush of being a player. 2 hours later, silver reverses and crashes. The system screams, cut loss. Curtis sells. $20,000 gone before lunch. Tuesday, crude oil breaks out. Buy. Reversal. Cut loss. Another $15,000 gone. Wednesday, coffee breaks out. Buy. Reversal. Cut loss. Day after day. Bleeding. It's called drawdown, and it feels like being slowly suffocated. In that room, the air was thick with tension. Doubt started to crawl in like a venomous snake. The former accountant whispered to the others, sweating through his shirt, "The system is broken. Dennis is tricking us. Nobody buys at the top and sells at the bottom like this. We are burning his money. We are going to be fired and sued." Some of them started to get creative. When a BY signal came, they hesitated. They thought, I'll wait for a pullback to get a better price. They tried to use their brains to outsmart the system. They wanted to feel safe. They wanted to be smarter than the rules. But Curtis Faith? He had no experience and, strangely, no fear. He was a machine. System says buy, he buys. System says cut, he cuts. He lost the most money in the group that first month because he took every single trade. He was mocked by the others. They thought the kid was reckless. They thought he was an idiot who would burn the account to zero. But Dennis looked at Curtis's trade logs and smiled. Why? Because Curtis was the only one brave enough to lose money exactly according to the rules. He understood that losing small was the fee you pay to play the game. Then, it happened. The winter of 1983. A freezing wind blew across America. Heating oil started to move. It broke the 20-day high. The system said, buy. Most of the turtles hesitated. They were bruised from the last month. They bought small, or they watched from the sidelines, terrified of another loss. But Curtis, he went all in. The price went up. And this is where the magic, or the torture, began. Dennis's rule wasn't just to buy, it was to pyramid. When you are winning, you must buy more. You must add to your position as the risk increases. Heating oil skyrocketed. The system said, buy more. Imagine the fear. You are up $50,000. Your instinct, your human survival instinct, screams, take the profit, bank it, don't let it disappear. What if it crashes? But Curtis gritted his teeth, ignored the knot in his stomach, and picked up the phone to the floor broker. Buy another 200 contracts, Curtis said. The broker paused. Kid, are you sure? The market is vertical. It has to pull back. Curtis didn't blink. I said buy. The price climbed higher. Buy more. The room looked at Curtis like he was insane. He was building a massive inverted pyramid on top of a volatile wave. One reversal, just one small dip, and he would lose everything. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff without a rope, leaning forward into the void. But the price didn't reverse. It exploded. An energy crisis. Demand spiked. Heating oil went vertical. While the other turtles made scraps because they were too scared to add to their winners, Curtis Faith's account went parabolic. 1 million became 2. 2 became 4. In a few short weeks, the kid made more money than most people see in a lifetime. By the time the trend broke and the sell signal triggered, the turtle group walked out of that room with over $175 million in profit. Richard Dennis had won the bet. He proved that to beat the market, you don't need to be smart. You need the ability to endure the pain of going against human nature. If the story ended here, it would be a Disney movie, but the financial market is a psychological thriller. 5 years later, the turtle program ended. They were kicked out of Dennis's safe tank and into the open ocean. And this is where the brutal truth comes out. Same teacher, same rules, but their fates went in opposite directions. Look at Jerry Parker. In class, he was boring. An accountant from Virginia, quiet, no ego, but Jerry had a superpower. He was stubborn. When he left Dennis, he started his own fund, Chesapeake Capital. For the next 30 years, what did Jerry do? He did exactly what Dennis taught him. He changed nothing. He didn't try to innovate. He didn't go on TV. He became a billionaire because he accepted being boring. He accepted that he knew nothing and let the rules run his life. Then look at Curtis Faith, the golden boy, the intuitive genius. After leaving Dennis, Curtis thought he was special. He thought he could feel the market better than the machine. He believed the press clippings that called him a prodigy. He wrote books. He became famous. But in trading, his discipline shattered. He started taking risks that weren't in the rules. He chased high-risk ventures. He broke the sacred commandments of risk management. And eventually, the prodigy declared bankruptcy. The market took back everything it gave him. And the most tragic twist? Richard Dennis himself, the master. After the experiment, during the crash of 1987, Dennis lost his cool. The man who wrote the rules broke them. He threw money at losers trying to make it back. He let his ego take the wheel. He lost 50% of his fund and had to close shop in shame. You see, Jerry Parker won because he killed his ego. Curtis Faith and Richard Dennis fell because they let their egos come back to life. The story of the turtles leaves us with a cold verdict. The trading system is only 10% of the game. You can download the Turtle Rules for free on Google right now. It's no secret. It's been public for decades. But why aren't there more millionaires? Because the other 90% is psychology. Don't look for a holy grail. Don't look for a magic robot. Look in the mirror. The enemy isn't the market. The enemy is the person looking back at you. It's the greed that wants to get rich quick. It's the fear of losing money. It's the ego that needs to be right. Trend following isn't dead. Only traders with no discipline are dead. Now, a message for you. This video marks a change. We are done with simple book summaries. You don't need another generic video telling you to save 10% of your income. You need to understand the battlefield. From today, Victor Invests is opening the archives of financial warfare. We are going to tell the stories of the real wars, the short squeezes that destroyed empires, the currency raids that toppled governments, the forgotten panics that shaped the world. We are moving from theory to history, from textbooks to the trenches. So, here is your challenge for this week. It is called the Solitude Challenge. For the next 7 days, pick one asset, and I want you to blindfold yourself. Unfollow all financial news. Delete CNBC from your bookmarks. Leave all the signal groups. Open your chart only once a day at 8 p.m. Look at the price. If it's higher than yesterday and above the trend line, tell yourself, uptrend. If it's lower, tell yourself, downtrend. That's it. Watch how your emotions change when you silence the noise of the crowd. You will find a strange peace, and that peace is where the war is won. I am Victor. Welcome to the new era.